It's great to be back with you, and our schedule is really goofy right now. I have a daughter decided to get married, and she's going to graduate college, and all of that's coming together, so we're doing a lot of traveling right now. But we're this close to having the second one off the payroll. So, hang in there. Anyway, it's great to be back with you. We missed being here, and we are excited. I'm excited about being back. Something just happen? Can you still hear me? Okay, so I'm getting old and my hearing's going bad. So we're gonna talk a couple weeks about different characters in the Christmas story, and today we're going to talk about a character that I've never ever even considered talking about, and that's King Herod. And his place in the story is very significant, but a couple of things in the background of this that we need to understand before we jump in. King Herod's part in the story really happened after the nativity, okay? So I don't mean to ruin anybody's nativity scenes at your house, but the wise men weren't there. They came later. And so the interaction with Herod happened after the nativity scene. And so as the story goes, what was going on is the Magi, the wise men from the east, they had read Jewish literature and they had come to the understanding through the star that they saw that the new king of the Jews was to be born. So they followed the star, they ended up in Jerusalem, and they were talking to King Herod, and they said, "Where's the new baby who's the king of the Jews?" And so he called in the religious scholars, and they said he's going to be born in Bethlehem. So the king told them, "I want you to go and worship this kid, and come back and tell me where it is so I can worship him too." Now, the Magi were told in a dream to go home a different direction and not interact with Herod because Herod had evil plans. Now, here's what we know about Herod. Herod was called Herod the Great, and he was famous for a few things, but one of the things he was famous for was remodeling the temple. And under Herod's reign, the temple became the most grand it ever was. And it was the temple that Jesus taught in, that Jesus turned over the tables. That's the place that Herod remodeled and rebuilt, and he's famous for that. But Herod has a very bizarre story. He had 10 wives, and each of his 10 wives had a son by him. And each of his 10 wives wanted their son to be the next king. Okay? And so there was a lot of conflict that went on, and the story's really bizarre because towards the end of his life, he would stand up and he would have his will read, and it would declare who the next king was going to be. Well, it turned out that many times he'd get mad at either the mom or the son, and he'd change his will. And so he had his will read publicly like a dozen times. It was really bizarre. And even one of the sons he had executed because he just got tired of him. So just to know, when you read the story, that when Herod kills all the babies, it was very common in that time period for a ruler to do whatever it took to stay in power. Okay? And so if it meant killing off families or killing off villages or killing off generations, they would do that to stay in power. And what Herod did is he was really in with the Roman government. And he did whatever he had to stay with the Roman government and to stay in with them so that he could stay in power. So, all of that in the background, turn with me, if you will, to Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2, beginning with verse 13. We're on page 966 if you're using the Pew Bible. And this is right after the Magi, the wise men, went home a different way. After they brought the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Matthew chapter 2, verse 13. When they had gone, that being the Magi, when they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. All right. This story is, and the reason I focused on this story today is because it's so relevant to our current reality. We live in a bizarre time in history, especially for American history. We live in a time when people will walk into parties in California with guns and kill 14 people and shoot 17 others, with intentions to kill a whole lot more. Well, we live in a time where terrorists also, as they do in California, will be in Paris and kill hundreds of people. We live in a time where terrorists will shoot down planes full of passengers on their way from Egypt to Moscow. We live in a time that is scary, that is very difficult and very hard to take in, and it's a time where our peace and our safety and our comfort is really threatened like it never has been. And I think as followers of Jesus, we have to look at what's going on and we have to ask, okay, how do we respond to this? You know, we could be like Jerry Falwell Jr., who yesterday told his graduating class, I think everybody on campus should get gun permits and get guns so that we can be prepared for whoever shows up on campus that shouldn't be here. Well, Christians taking up arms, not really a biblical idea, but it is something that is a possibility. So what do we do? How do we react to what is going on? And I think from this story, we have a couple of things that are very helpful for us if we'll pay attention. Okay? So the first thing that I want us to see is that nothing happens in history or in our lives that God doesn't know about. Okay? So look at what happened. Again, back in verse 13, when they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. All right? And real simply, I want us to understand that God knew before the beginning of time that Herod was going to do what he was going to do. God knew it was going to happen. God knew before the two people walked into the building in California and started shooting people, they were going to do that. God knew that the plane flying from Egypt to Russia was going to be shot down. God knew what was going to take place in Paris. And not only does it happen on a grand scale like that, it happens in our individual lives. God knows when the boss is going to call us in and say, I'm sorry, you're laid off. Or you're fired. God knows when our spouse is going to come home and say, I don't want to live with you anymore. God knows when we walk in, sit in the doctor's office, and he looks across the desk and says, you have cancer. None of that surprises God. None of it's a shock. None of it catches God off guard where he goes, oh, my heavens, I had no idea this was coming. He knows what's going on before it happens. You see, and there's really a great comfort in that because he is a father who has so much incredible power that he can do amazing things. I remember one time I was driving down Blanding, just going away from city, just on the other side of 295, and my son was following just a few cars behind me in his pickup truck. And so we were driving, and I switched lanes, and I looked in the mirror, and my son was like 17, so I was just keeping an eye on him, and he had a wreck on Blanding. Now, I don't know how many millions of cars go down Blanding, but there's a lot of them. So I turned around, and I parked across Blanding, and he was on the other side. My intention was to get to him. Well, Jacksonville is now number 2 in the country in pedestrians being killed. I don't know if you know that. And it would have been an interesting game of Frogger for me to try to get across. And so I was looking, I was going, and it dawned on me, I'm not going to be able to do this. I am totally incapable of crossing the street to get to my son. And here I was, a father, just wanting to make sure he was okay, wanting to make sure he was fine. He wasn't really hurt or anything. I wanted to get there. I wanted to check on him. I wanted to be there. I knew what was going on, but I couldn't do anything about it but call his cell phone. Now, what's really awesome about God, about our God, is he not only knows what's going on, he can do something about it. He has the power and the ability. God is greater than terrorists. God is greater than cancer. God is greater than anything that we can name, and he has the ability and the possibility to fix it. That's a beautiful thing, and it's a great thing of comfort. And nothing that goes on in our world or our lives is a surprise to God, and he is the most powerful force that has ever existed. Now, I know that creates a lot of questions, but there's so much comfort in that. As I go through this journey of life, as life throws the curveballs that it curves, as we deal with this new reality of where we live, God still knows, and he still can. And I'm sure we could go around the room and we could stand up and we could take turns and tell stories of times that God intervened, whether it was physically or relationally or emotionally or however he did, that God stepped in and did something supernatural that only God could do. What an awesome reality that God knows what we're facing and knows who we are and knows the hurts and knows the heartaches, knows the fear. He knows. And just like in the story when he came to Joseph in a dream, God is actively participating in this world, and we need to never, ever, ever forget that. And that he can make a difference in those things as they come. Now, that leads to, though, the big, real, huge question is, why doesn't he do what I want him to do? Why doesn't he intervene in the way that I want him to intervene? Why doesn't he step in and stop the terrorists from walking into the building? Why doesn't he step in and stop the plane from being blown up? Why doesn't he step in and make the cancer go away? Why are there times when God says no? And I think that's the second part of the story that is so key for us as we go through this new reality in which we live. All right, so the story goes on. Verse 15, where he stayed until the death of Herod, which would have been when Jesus was about 8 or 9 years old. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. That was a prophecy given to Hosea about 600 years before the event. Okay, now process that, 600 years. That's 6 centuries, more than half. That's a lot of years. Okay? So think that God was involved in what was taking place. Well, it goes on, and it says, so then when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious. He gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah, 500 years earlier, a voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. And God knew before the beginning of time and told Jeremiah, there's an event coming where the moms and dads in Bethlehem are going to weep because their kids have been killed. Now here's what I want us to see and to understand. God knows everything that's going on. But God has a plan that we cannot possibly understand. And so sometimes God chooses to go a direction contrary to what we understand and what we hope for. I mean, look at the story of Jesus there as the Magi left. Herod was the perfect person to be king because he rebuilt the temple. He had a relationship with the Romans that allowed the Jewish people to function as Jewish people, even though they were under Roman rule, which allowed the Jewish leaders to be influential in what was taking place so that the stage would be set for the Messiah to come. It all worked out just right. But then Herod, knowing who Herod was, had free will. God knowing he'd make a bad choice. So he sent Jesus to Egypt so that Jesus could die for us. Now you notice when the message came to Joseph, he didn't sit down and say, okay, so here's what's going to happen, Joseph, just so you understand. Here's why you're going to Egypt. This is how it's all going to work out, and I know it's not going to make any sense to you right now, but here's so you can have a clear picture, Joseph. I want you to go to Egypt so that I can fulfill this, so that you can see all the details. Here they are. It's not what he did. He said, go to Egypt, protect the boy. That's what I want you to do. I want you to trust me. That's all I'm asking. Take the boy and his mother to Egypt, keep them safe. I got the rest of it. You just do this right now. And so when we go through this journey and life throws us difficulties, there's so many times it was just like, God, why? Why aren't you making me well? Why aren't you curing my loved one? Why aren't you fixing this problem in our world? And we have to understand that God sees a picture that we don't get. At MD Anderson Hospital in Houston, in the cancer center, there is in the hallway a big bell. And when someone finishes their chemotherapy treatments and they have their last treatment, they go in the hallway and they ring the bell as a sign of made it through, because chemotherapy just devastates your body. But I survived this and I'm going to beat cancer. Well, 2 weeks ago, we received a text message with a picture of my wife's brother ringing the bell for the third time. And it was very typical looking cancer patient with everything that chemotherapy does to the body. And I looked at that picture and yes, I was relieved and I was thankful, but there was a part of me that was saying, God, why is he having to go through this 3 times? I look at Cliff's life and I see who he is, and he's a godly man. He's not perfect, but he's a godly man. He loves Jesus, he pursues him, and that's his first priority. Why is he having to go through this? Why is he facing having to ring that stupid bell again? Why can't it just be done? And I think if God were to come and sit across the table from me and talk to me, he would look me in the eye and he would say, I know you're frustrated, but here's all I need from you. I need you to trust me. You don't understand the story. You don't understand where this is headed. You don't understand what this is all about. And even if your brother-in-law loses his life over this, you still need to trust me. Because I'm the one with the plan. And I don't mean to just be so off-putting with how God would say that, but we need to understand that God has a plan that we don't get. So when Herod goes and does what he does, it's just mind-boggling for us to try to process. Why would God allow that to happen? But you look at the whole story and you look back and say, yeah, Herod had to be there so that the whole story could go on. I'm reading a fascinating book right now. It's called Preparing for Heaven. And it's written by a man named Gary Black Jr. And it's written in connection with Dallas Willard. And we talk a lot about him around here. But Dallas Willard died. And the last year of Dallas Willard's life, he and Gary Black wrote this book. And so in the last week or so of Dallas Willard's life, he was in a hospital bed, and Gary Black was there, and he would interact with Dallas Willard, and they were talking about eternity and all of those things. And Dallas Willard would have times when he would actually begin to pass from this life to the next. And he would come back, and he would sit up on an elbow and say, Gary, I have to tell you what I just saw. And so he recorded some of that. He wrote some of it down. But one of the events that happened is Dallas Willard went on this journey and he came back. And he said, Gary, I see it all so clearly now. And he said, what do you mean? Does it mean like scales came off of your eyes? And he said, no, it's not like that. See, I've known all along that this was the truth, and I've known all along this is the way it was, but it's like going to the optometrist for the first time in years and putting glasses on and seeing clearly again. it's like I get it now. That this life that we live on this earth really is just the beginning of eternity. It makes sense now what Paul said in Colossians 3:1, set your mind on things above, not on the things of the earth, because the things of the earth are so temporary. And so we're on this journey, and now we're passing from this life to the next, but really it's the same life. It's the same reality. We just can't see it clearly. And see, I think that's significant because one of the things that happens to us when heartache and difficulty or our world changes, despair and fear step in because we look at it in the current reality instead of the eternal eyes. See, God's up to something. And the stuff he's up to matters for eternity more than it matters now. And that's real important for us to remember. I wish I could just stand up here and say, you know what, just follow Jesus and pursue after him and you never have another problem as long as you live. But I know that's not true. If we all just follow Jesus, then all of this reality that's going on in our world will go away. But no, that's not true. And the bottom line, the only thing we really have is to trust. That's all we've got. And the amazing thing is, that's enough. We just trust. So today, I just want to end with this question. What do you need to trust God with today? What's going on in your life? What about the journey do you need to say, you know what, God, I don't get this. It doesn't make any sense, but I trust you to be God. And I trust you to do best for that which matters for eternity. I trust you. What do you need to trust God with today? And the beautiful thing is God never stops being God. Will you trust? Let's pray.